everybody, welcome to Rocket Lasso Live, Season 4, Episode 3. Sorry for the technical difficulties. YouTube wasn't cooperating, I had to relink it, and that meant I had to restart everything, but it all seems to be working now. Is the audio doubling? Hopefully it's not doubling. It was for a second because a video I checked started playing the audio, and it was doing a feedback loop, so what are you going to do? Let's see. We got people, lots of people in the Twitch chat already. Last week I messed up the YouTube one where I forgot to set it to public, so there's nobody on YouTube. But now we've already got some people over there. Chop, Pier, Scott, Biavana, Lucas. How goes it, everyone? New Flavor, Mick, Scott, Magic, Tobias, Bralius, Dean, Rogue, Pro Tools, also known as Tommy, Luminetrix, and more people. Oh, there's Gumbo popping in, Crossfader again. Wait, is Crossfader? Crossfader's in both chats. Hi everybody, welcome. Thanks for hanging out. Okay, so start getting those links together right away, so we can start tackling questions, so that we have fun things to talk about. Make sure I've got the right software up. It's a very busy 2 weeks for me. There's a lot happening. We're meshed the spline, which was supposed to launch a while ago, but then I got distracted by creating things for Maxon. Meshed the utility splines are all but done, so those need their marketing, but that's been put on pause because everything else is so busy. We started working on a new plugin, and I'm going to be preparing my presentation for Maxon. So that's going to be most of next week, as well as a huge video I got to put together. And then the week after, I'm gone for NAB. There won't be a regular Rocket Lasso Live, but I got them to schedule one of my presentations, because I've actually got two while I'm there. The presentation should be at the exact same time as normal. It might be like a half hour later, but it's the closest time slot. So I'll still be live at the same time, just not via this. And what else? Anyway, Rick Barrett from Maxon is going to be guest next week. So a week from right now, there will be the first guest of Season 4. The people are starting to put questions in. I guess to recap, on YouTube, if you're on YouTube, you can type out a question, just kind of shout it out and I'll see it. Like, yeah, a nice cue in the beginning, or a hey Chris, like it'll jump out at me. And I alternate between the two chats, and I don't mind typed out questions. If you want to put a link to some cool inspiring work that you've seen, you got to go over to Twitch to post the link, because YouTube does not allow that. But that's all good. Yeah, it looks like Argo, you're trying to put a link. So you're gonna have to jump over to the Twitch to be able to post that link if you want to. So feel free to jump over. There are advantages to both, which I've covered before, but on YouTube, you can go and rewind, which is really handy. But on Twitch, it's always gonna be in real time. You get faster refresh, where it's like on Twitch, you're only like 2 seconds behind me, where on YouTube, it can go like 10, 20 seconds behind. So there's more lag. But yeah, being able to rewind is really handy. If you're not already, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you subscribe, so you get the notifications. If you're on Twitch, you can follow, and following, you don't have to like do any kind of subscription or anything. You just follow, and you get an email every time I go live, which is also handy. And if you're not familiar, I might as well pull up. If you head to, let me open up a new window here, drag it over here, go to rocketlasso.com and jump to the community page, and then share the screen. That is not the right website. That was weird. I went to some sort of baseball website. Anyway, jumping into the thing I control. Here we go. Yeah, if you go to rocketlasso.com, you can click on community or community, and that's going to jump you over here. And then there's this handy dandy join on the Slack button, and that'll join the Slack. And I also notify there, and we do all sorts of things over on the Slack channel. So that's a place you should come and hang out. Here's a link to it in the chat. Boom. And one for YouTube. Boom. Anyway, why don't we begin the process of tackling some questions inside of Cinema 4D R25. Scrolling up, I'm gonna see who put the first one in there. Magic was asking if it's possible to do this with mesh to spline. I'm very curious what it might be. So I'll drag this over and let's take a look together. I muted the tab already. Play. I wonder what player that is. Very unusual. First of all, who? Oh, Imaginary Forces. Nice. They do amazing work. I'm gonna still leave this not maximized. So it looks like we got lots of crazy, weird, stringy blob things. There wasn't a specific time code, so let's see if there's... Right, oh, okay, so then we start getting into these crazier things. I don't know that much the spline in particular. I mean, honestly, some of these shapes we're seeing, Ricochet would be more appropriate. The, yeah, like Ricochet would be the thing that would be filling up these shapes. Some of the different, there's a lot of different things happening in a lot of different places, and you get this nice little final thing where the things are drifting away. This might be worth a proper tutorial in the future. So let's put a pin in that one for now, but don't forget about that one. Like, hit me up again with this question for the future. I'll say that. Let's see, I'm looking if there's any unusual names. Putting a link. It looks like it's mostly regulars right now, which is all good. Yep, those links don't work there, so people just popping over to this channel. So Gumbo, what do you got? Mute. Pull over here. Oh, look at that. We got a cute, kind of freaky looking Elmo from Alex Kiesling. Elmo has no free will. Elmo is a puppet. Anyway, we've got these crazy blobby shapes traveling around. I'm trying to see if there's any sort of dynamicness to them. I gotta tell you, I'm not really seeing much in the way of dynamic movement. So stylistically, I mean, it's pretty cool. I like the idea. It does definitely evoke Elmo. The eyes are twitching as well, which is nice. So here is the thoughts. Inside of Cinema, am I sharing the right screen? Yes, I am. Okay. I want something that's a little more blobby. Yeah. We don't have to go super fancy, but what's a good shape? I mean, honestly, even that Elmo shape was pretty flat. So why don't we just do some straightforward volume buildering? So we'll just plop a sphere in there, plop another sphere in there. Oh, we'll just make a little snowman shape. That'll be a nice basic thing. Okay, so basic snowman. Put that into a mesher. Blurp. And if we are so inclined, let's see where our mesh density is quite nice, actually. So just a little smoothing. Smooth. Should start, until I recognize where all these are, I should start doing this to see search. There it is. Iron, middle left. Drop this in here. Just smooth that out a bit. So you should be able to get a slightly better flow. You do get these little pinches on that, unfortunately, sometimes, where you see it's just where it made this type of polygon, and the smooth doesn't handle those very well. So one type that doesn't, so you get those little bits poking out. I'm not going to worry about it, but something to keep in mind. All right, so here's a thought. Do we want to do splines? How do I want to actually do this? There's several different approaches we could do. Yeah, this might be, I don't know if it'd be the actual way to do it, but it's going to be a way to do it. So here's the thought. If we do regular particles, does that even work? I don't know, do the particles work that way? How do they get them facing outward? Yeah, okay, we got a lot of layers to this one, so it could be kind of interesting. All right, so emitter, and I'm going to aim them downward. So it's going to make a series of particles. It'll be large enough, just a T for scale. It'll be large enough where they should fall in all directions. So if I hit play, those should just start shooting straight down. They're going to strike. They're going to pass right through the model. Not surprising. Now, in order to stop them from passing straight through, let's make the lowest volume we can. Drop in a cube instead and say I would like to show the objects. We're not going to get giant cubes. That will jump down to 555, nice and small. And that becomes a dynamic object, a rigid body, so those should be dynamic now. And a volume, the volume mesher also will become a simulation collider body. So now those should be bouncing off. So now we get these bouncing off. I want no friction, so under dynamics, I'm sorry, under collision, let's say 0 bounce, 0 friction. So now they're a little more free to just slide around. And I might even change the cube to be calculated as a sphere so that they'll be rounder and they'll be able to slide around a little bit more. Okay, now that's working fine. Let's give it a quick save Actually, give me a moment. I got to make sure it's saving into the proper folder. Yeah, that would have shown the new plugin name if I hadn't just carefully done that. Episode 3. Okay. And I just got to save it. It's not letting me drag cinema back over until I get out of this menu. 1A. I'll say snowman stick. Okay, neat. Sorry about that. Pull this back over. So, okay, so what do we got? We got particles flowing down around the snowman. Now we want to kind of take on the overall shape of this thing. So we need them to be attracted to the overall surface. A couple different ways we could do that. We could do it really simply because it's a simple shape. So we could do a cylindrical thing where they're all just pulling inward. I don't know how much calculation hit we're going to take, but let's try doing the brute force method, which will be, I would like a field force. And the field force, the object tab, I would like it to see this mesh. I'll say I only want to see the surface of the mesh, which means it'll be taking on the direction. You'll see it create all these little tick marks, and they're aiming straight away from the surface. And I want the radius to be crazy big, so it'll be large enough that these can't really escape. The strength we will determine up there, and I think you can even say, yeah, restrict to the outside, so it's not worried about calculating the inner part. I don't know if that speeds it up, but it shouldn't slow it down. Okay, I'll give that the strength of gravity, which is 40. And in theory, those should be either getting pulled in or pushed out as well. So hit play, see what happens. Hard to tell, kind of feels like they're getting pushed away. The volume, the fields, I will say, hey, don't display, because we don't need it to. And I'll just crank the power up so we can see what's actually going on. So I'll say 40, or 400 rather. Play. And yeah, you see they're getting flung away. So it's not pulling them towards. So direction, invert. And we'll calm this back down. We'll do 50. And they are, well, a couple things. First of all, let's set this to absolute velocity, which we almost never do. I'm going to say that these have to move at a very specific speed. They have to move at that speed. And let's speed them up. They don't seem to be speeding up. Oh, that's, yeah, the strength is the velocity, right? They don't seem to be changing. Yeah, if I change these numbers, it's not updating here. Am I doing it wrong, or is that a bug? Because that's a radius. They're traveling on the outside. They're moving super slow. And set absolute velocity. There's nothing slowing them down. I feel like that's a bug. The speed isn't being taken into consideration. I could be missing something. I kind of don't think I am. We'll instead say change direction. So now it's using their original speed and just changing their direction. Although if that's now changing the direction, shouldn't that be very forcefully... there's only one thing affecting the direction, and it would be overall gravity and then pulling them towards the surface here. But they are not being pulled towards the surface. The, restrict effect inside. Okay, I just saw, Terry noticed I clicked on the wrong one. I clicked outside, or I clicked inside when I meant outside. So now, hopefully that's going to be working better. So let's try the absolute velocity and see if that works. No, it's still not working. So, yeah, it's still a problem. But now hopefully this change of direction works. Well, even that's still not working. I'm going to set it to inside and out, and we'll see if that starts behaving itself a little bit better. Like I say, it's not doing a great job here. Dynamics, gravity, 0. So now gravity's not forcing it to go. There should be no friction. Now it's acting like it's pushing it away. Maybe the direction's opposite again. Some of that felt weird and clunky. Some of it might have been me messing something up. But yeah, now at least they're being attracted. Okay, cool. They're being attracted to it with a change of direction. And then I want to give it additional direction to be traveling. So I can create a solid. And the solid is a direction, which right now is positive y. So it's just pushing up. I'll say I want to go -1. And I want this effect to add to the one below it. So that should be getting pushed down. And getting attracted, although you'll see that they're just stopping dead. There's no friction, so I don't know. The change direction I would think would force them to travel around. Doesn't seem to be doing a very good job of it. So let's go back to our regular add velocity. Now it's way too strong, 55. And then we need some friction. Forces, friction. And this is going to drain energy out from the scene. So we're constantly adding energy, and now we're constantly draining energy. Okay, finally starting to get somewhere. We're draining the energy out, and you can actually see that's following the curve back in again. So now we just need to get a balance between these two things. So I'll make this 3 times stronger. So it's really attracting to the surface, and it's really pulling down. And we need more frames, 999. Friction could probably be even higher. I'll double the friction, slow them all down. And then the emitter should keep on going forever. I don't think these need to live for very long, so I'll say 100. And we'll crank up the... let's get 10 times as many. And we'll have this go forever. There's going to be a giant hiccup, which hopefully doesn't crash us, because we had to do a lot of settings there. Okay, cool. Didn't take too long. I had to pre-calculate to catch back up to this new number I fed in. I'm going to do a quick save right there and hit play. Let's see what we get. That's way slow. What was that? Why is that so slow? That's very strange. Okay, let's try some other things. Let's see what caused that. I'm going to go back to the original count here, and it's working fine. Wow, something about that giant number for the stop emission did not like that. Very unusual. So now I went back to just adding an extra 0 instead of a bunch of zeros, and that's fine. Maybe it's like doing something where it pre-caches like all the particles or something. That wasn't something I'm familiar with, but is what it is. Kind of weird. Okay, so now we got a lot more. They should be traveling along. They want to take on the shape. Let's even have this downward pull be less. So right now it's -1. I'll say -0.2. So it's significantly weaker. Well, we can't go too low, because you see now it's getting attracted so long it's going to get pulled into this valley. So yeah, we need gravity to be strong enough to overcome that. And 0.5 seems to be enough. Okay, go back. Let these start traveling downward. We got a nice flow over the surface while sticking to the surface. And it's taking on the shape all right. It's not nearly as smooth as I want it to be. And then what's happening, because I told these particles to only live for 100 frames. Well, let's see if they're disappearing. Yeah, okay, they are disappearing. So they need to live for longer than I'm giving them. Starting to question my entire approach on this one now. But let's see. They need to live for longer given the current setup. Now, pretty much this was doing its thing. The goal would be, if this works, to start tracing these. And I don't even know for a fact if the tracer is going to acknowledge them. Do not trace the vertices. And let's see if we get some nice lines. We are getting lines. Oop, nope, no, we're not getting lines. So what's happening here is it is tracing the original particle and not the dynamic version of it. It's a bit of a problem. Let's see if there's any way around that. There's usually a way around things. Matrix object set to object mode. Said object will be the emitter. Let's see if I can clone out to the axis. Okay, good step. You see that I just told that to clone onto the axis of the emitter, and that seems to be following the dynamics. So if indeed that is working, let's let this calculate in the proper order. So the first thing to calculate is the mesh, and then the field force, and then the matrix clones onto that, and then after that the tracer will view the matrix, and that should hopefully start tracing the matrix. Come on. Ooh, that's weird. Wait, now suddenly the... Oh no, it's one of the viewport. When I hit play, they're not following it, but when I mouse over the viewport, they do the correct direction. That is causing us trouble because that's not what the lines are acknowledging. That's not one of those just viewport refresh things. AJ, you are probably not wrong. In this case, X-Particles probably would have done a pretty good job for us. Yeah, it's a little, we had a couple dead ends here that I feel like we shouldn't have. And the overall rig is fine. And then a lot of it even goes to, I feel like we were going fancier than we needed to. And we haven't even gotten to the final rig. Having said, well, I don't want to use plugins if we don't have to. Let me think, because, you know, we really just want to get some lines tracing on the outside. And, you know, if it's a very basic shape, I'm thinking we could do this with Ricochet really easily to generate our base lines. But I was trying to do it in vanilla cinema, which is just not cooperating right now. What other options do we have? Get some nice lines flowing on the outside, following the surface. Yeah, like I said, trying to do it in vanilla. I just want lines on the outside. We can't make, I mean, the plan was to trace a bunch of lines on the outside and then to clone onto said lines to then get the flow direction. I honestly do not want to do Ricochet to show, but that would give us the lines really well. So if okay, so I'm going to use a plugin. I'm going to use our own plugin called Ricochet. And it's going to be different than we did last time, but not super different. Okay, so here's the idea. Ricochet is a shape, and I could feed it our geometry, and what's going to happen is Ricochet is generating this line, and the line's going to bounce around on the inside. And you can see I can keep on making there be more bounces, and so, you know, ton of lines in there. So that's basic Ricochet. But we can do additional things with the Ricochet. And my thought here is, what if I'm going to pull out the snowman, tell Ricochet to view it as a linked object, so it is still bouncing around inside, and then set Ricochet to matrix mode. So then I can create a series of, let's make a matrix, set matrix to radial, pull it up in the air. So you can see I've got this radial, and there's currently 5, and we'll leave it at 5 to start out. From the top view, let's make sure that those are kind of perfectly right there. And then if I tell Ricochet to view this matrix object, each one becomes a starting point. You see we get like 5 lasers all shooting straight out in that direction. They don't hit anything, so they'll just keep traveling. But now I'll say that Ricochet, hey, modify the object we're looking at, and I want it to get a shell. So I'll do a shell, and that will expand. And now you can see that the lines have gotten trapped in between this outer shell and inner shell. You see they're traveling around. So even if I hide the original object, you will now see that they're trapped on the outside, so we're kind of getting an outline of it. But then we can push this further, which is where it gets interesting, is first of all, I'll say, okay, Ricochet, align to the surface. So I'm going to say surface alignment, and I'll keep increasing. You can see the lines will get smoother as I go. And they're traveling from the top, and typically they're heading downward, which is fine. But now I'm going to say I want them to head very downward, and we have a setting for that. Under Modify, we can give a direction link. And if I pull this over, you see we can even create one. So I'm going to say create. And now what this is doing is creating a force direction, and it's aiming down on, actually it's aiming on, yeah, it's aiming, you see the arrow aims downward. So essentially this is applying a gravitational force onto the Ricochet line, saying like, hey, when you bounce, also try and go more downward. So if I take this and like rotate it here, you see that they're going to kind of lean that way, or they're going to kind of lean that way. So now they're being told like, okay, you got a pretty decent amount of force saying go downward. So what this means is I could start increasing, okay, a couple things. These are traveling downward, but then they're getting trapped kind of and pooling at the bottom. So what I'm going to do is say, make a sphere and shrink it, and then move it right there. I don't think we have to make this editable. And then inside of Ricochet, I'll say, hey, there's a terminator object. So when you crash into this sphere, end. So like just stop. So the instant they strike into that sphere, the lines terminate. So that we get a nice, very clean version of the line. So now that that is happening, I can go back to the matrix object and I can start increasing the count, and we're going to get more and more and more and more and more lines. And now you see how easy it is for me to make as many of these as I want. And now we're getting this really nice, organic, instant, pre-calculated version of the line. Elaine FX is saying we thought of every possibility with Ricochet. Yeah, we spent a lot of time with that tool, so you can see where it does all these weird, crazy things like this. Because yeah, we went overboard with the functionality. So anyway, let's see if I can shrink that. I'm going to shrink it down and see how close we can get down here. Yeah, if I go too far, it'll go inside the snowman. But if I go right around here, then it should be pretty good. It's still going to be bouncing off the surfaces. And if I subdivided the snowman more, it'd probably work even better. But yeah, that's actually doing a pretty good job. As many lines as we want, all based off the matrix. Make as many count as we want. The more we have, the better I think it would look a bit. We could also add in some randomness if we want to. In this circumstance, I don't think we really do want to. But yeah, if I said, you know, get some randomness from the surface and we start giving that some random, you can see that as it's traveling down, each one will randomly bounce and tilt, but still the overall gravity is saying to pull downward. So yeah, we get options like that as well. Actually, yeah, there was already some random in there. So now if I turn off the random, look how straight those all got. The very, very straight lines going down. Now, I know we made a very symmetrical looking object, but we would not actually be limited to that. Let me turn off Ricochet for a second. If we go back to the snowman and we grab, say, like this middle blob and we scooted it over. So he's got a little bit of like a beer belly or something, a belly button. If I turn Ricochet back on again, then you'll see that those lines have adapted and, you know, they're curving out to that shape. So, you know, we have additional options that way too. Okay, cool. So now we've got that modified shape. We get these lines. This would be a great circumstance for utility splines to come in, which these are not available yet. But if I were to put that into a smooth, then we get the option to let me do it based on step. So we're subdividing based on step, and I can smooth those lines out after fact. And now look at these really clean curves that we're getting from it. So, you know, utility splines pair really well with everything else. I guess I won't use, I'm trying to think of a good way of getting around it because I do want these to be nice and smooth and curved. It'll look better for the demo, but it's, you know, nobody's going to have that file when I put the scene file out on Patreon. So we'll ignore that for now. And then for anybody who doesn't have Ricochet, if you are on Patreon, I'll make an editable version of that. So you can, even when you open it, it yells at you don't have this. You could just replace Ricochet with the made editable version. So keep that in mind. Okay, cool. Now, getting back to like the Elmo reference, there's like those weird little blobby curls that were traveling along the entire thing. I think that's a pretty simple setup from this point forward. Creating a cloner. What shape should we do? What's the easiest thing? I mean, their shapes were really kind of weird and unique. I want something that feels like it's directional and facing outward, which is really the goal. We could go extra weird with it. I'm kind of feeling extra weird with this one. So what I'm thinking is if we make a hemisphere, and I'll even leave it low poly, and I want to shift the axis so it's aiming upward, and we're going to make this into an eyeball. So we'll make two materials. There's a white one, and duplicate it and make a black material. Select a polygon, loop, and grow. Drag that on, and that automatically creates a selection tag for us. So we'll just make sure that comes second. There we go. So that is now our eyeball. We'll rename it I, T for scale. And I was making something so it was very directional, because now we plop that into the cloner, tell the cloner to clone onto an object. The object will be the Ricochet, and now we get a whole bunch of lines. And it looks like they are aligning facing the direction of the spline, but we're going to need some sort of rail spline on this as well. I guess they're all going to have to be identical, so what we'd probably do would be make a copy and face them all inward, or honestly we could probably get away with just a target because they're all facing very symmetrically outward. This might not work perfectly, but I've got other ideas of ways we could do it if need be. But creating, with the cloner selected, creating a target effector, and now you see that they're all aiming inward. The target effector, I'll say reverse heading, and now they'll all be pretty much aiming outward. T for scale. But they're all, you see that they're all aiming directly at this target, where I really want them relatively aiming at that target. And we'll see if this works. I haven't done it in a while. There's a target object it can do. We could do a like up vector, but I don't think that's going to do what I want it to do. No, see, they're all still aiming very much at that center point. And B, there we go. We want this to look proper creepy. So let's bring the original mesh back, make the eyes small enough. Nice. But you see how these are not stuck to the surface? They're like aiming backwards directly at the target. So we'll see if this works. I would like to change the target mode to field direction. So that will be looking at these fields. What direction should that be? I would like it to be based on the original mesh. And I want it to be based on the surface of the mesh. Excellent. The instance we did that, it looks like some are a little bit, if they're sneaking inside the mesh, they'll aim backwards. If we do try and restrict this to the inside and invert, nope. If we try and limit to the outside, that seems to miss some of them. If we only do inside, yeah, that starts missing some. So how do we invert the ones that snuck inside? Because yeah, that's working, but they're inside. I guess we could invert with them. We could invert them with a mask. I kind of don't want to do that. We're just adding in complications we don't need to. Like this is mostly working. Let's get a couple extra steps going, and then maybe we'll go back and visit that more. Cloner, you can, I believe we can say, cloner, fix texture. Don't worry about aligning the clone. That'll save some calculation time. Target, that's not anything. Distribution, that's fine. I think we can do a multi-instance here. I don't think that breaks anything. It should make the cloner run faster. And then hopefully we can just set a lovely rate on this thing. Hit play. Oh, and there we go. It looks like they're moving at a very... You see how the speed is very inconsistent right now? Let's tell Ricochet the spline mode to enable linear none. Nope, that didn't do it. Uniform? Okay, yeah, a uniform speed. So now they're all moving at a very constant speed. And that doesn't actually, I don't think we don't need subdivisions on it. So now they're moving at the same speed. Now back to the cloner. We'll give it some rate variation, and we can also do a little bit of offset and offset variation. So that's going to change their starting point. And if we just randomize that like a whole bunch, then it should be all random. And if we do a rate variation, then you'll see that they'll start traveling at different speeds. So some can go faster and slower. If we want that, we can. If we don't want that, it also doesn't have to. And now those are all traveling downward, and they're all facing outward. And shrink them down. And yeah, we can make as many of those as we want. Dynamically speaking, I'm trying to think of, like, you know, it would be great if we could make them not pass through each other. The reference, they were passing right through each other. Now, a lot of people would probably reach for the push-apart effector, but this is the type of circumstance that the push-apart effector, I think, really doesn't work. So that's going to happen afterward. I'm going to say, okay, push-apart effector, I would like you to push apart, like, very little. So let's make a very small radius. I'm going to keep on increasing until it pushes out. You know what? At a glance, it's working better than I thought it would. But what ends up happening is once the circumstances change, they can really like twitch around. But as I just said, like it's working better than I thought it would. Oh, but okay, up here you see that the radius really isn't super cooperating because that's where they're suddenly coming into existence. So really our initial radius should probably have been larger. But yeah, pushing them apart a little bit is looking better, I think. But if we did speed it up, it's going to get, or I think when we rendered it, you really feel the twitchiness. Hide the lines so we can just see kind of the final. And yeah, even hiding the lines, we can feel the, like some of these kind of popping around a little bit. Now, that's the target effector. Fields, I don't feel like the fields is going to do much for us. And you can't, there's no such thing as a target. Yeah, there's no target inside of the field list. Yeah, you can't do that. So we can't ease them that way. We could possibly, they do pop on the inside, so we gotta still figure out a way of fixing that. Actually, I guess that would be the current step that we need to do. So how do we not worrying about the push apart, how do we stop them from accidentally flipping onto the inside? I can think of two ways. One, it wouldn't be very difficult. The easy way of doing it would be we need to shrink this mesh down or make a different version of the mesh that's just slightly smaller. But I still want to visually see this original one, so I'm just going to kind of brute force make a copy of it. And we have options. I'll turn that off temporarily. And now we're only looking at this new one. So here are the options. Inside of the volume builder, we could make a dilate and erode, which essentially is like inflate or deflate. And if we set this to a negative number, you can see the entire thing shrinks. And I don't think we have to go down very far until like the eyeballs, the axis of the eyeball won't be accidentally sneaking outside of it. So just going in like negative 1.5, I think is probably enough. So let's see if, do you see all these backwards eyeballs? Let's see if going into the target and switching out that mesh for the new one, I can just drop it on top and it'll take on the settings. You know what? That almost seems worse. Surface radius. We are not restricting the effect. I only want the outside, and they're all, that is worse in every way. Maybe we should inflate it? That's not what I was expecting. Yeah, they do seem to face the direction better when I inflate it out instead of in. So yeah, we'll do that. I'll inflate it out, hide it visually, and pull this in. And okay, they do now actually, they do all seem to be facing outward, the correct direction. So maybe that works. That was a brute force method, but it seems to be working well. Like the transition there is a lot better. So then now we could try the push apart and we'll see how that works. And what I meant, yes, you see how occasionally, right here, you see how some of them are like twitching, like, whoa, they're trying to get away from each other. I wonder if we can get away with a delay effector. And I'll save that. And yeah, we'll just add into the cloner. We'll actually create a delay effector. I haven't actually made a regular old delay effector in a long time because I'm always inside of fields. So this will affect the position and the rotation. Actually, let's just do the rotation for now. And I want it to affect, yeah, blend is essentially what we want. It's going to transition from one to the other, so we get less of a twitch. Maybe we need position as well. The rotations do seem better, but let's do position as well. Position. Okay, so now do these feel like, even if they're doing that twitching movement, it's going to take some time for them to do this transition. I'm going to increase it even more. Yeah, that did a really good job. I don't usually do these like more, these aren't very, a push apart effector is not very precise, and a delay effector is not very precise. And I tend to avoid not precise things, but that doesn't mean that they don't work. And this does seem to be working okay. So push apart, let's give it a little bit more radius because they are intersecting a little bit. And then I guess the push apart is also pushing them into the surface and potentially away from the surface. So yeah, we got to be careful there. But that's actually working surprisingly well where they're not running into each other. I was going to possibly try and do a dynamic version where these were all dynamically moving down, but they would suddenly pop into existence or jump to the top, and I feel like they'd have to flow from the bottom up to the top, and that could create a lot of problems. So this is actually not too bad. It's not perfect, but like as the overall effect goes, I think it's pretty good. Under the original cloner, we could start increasing our count, and that's actually going to go a long way for filling this up very quickly. Keep in mind that each time I do this, it's increasing the count per line, and there's only so much space that these can fill. So yeah, very quickly it's going to start pushing them away from the surface a lot and slowing us down, but we can fill up that space quite a bit. Whoa, I just said undo and it suddenly was super freaking out. So a couple things just because I wonder if we can get a nice some scale going, randomize the scale a bit. So in the cloner, let's create a random, not position, but a scale, uniform, absolute, and they can get larger. I don't want to go too big, but you'll have some larger, some smaller. And let's see if this works. The push apart effector looks at the scale of the objects. We just have to make sure in the cloner under the effectors that the random comes before the push apart. And yeah, now you see that each of them started trying to stay away from each other. So now we have larger ones and smaller ones properly pushing away from each other based on the push apart. The delay effector is trying to calm down the transition from one position to the next. So they're kind of avoiding their, based on their current radius. Nice smooth transitions from one direction to another being extracted from the surface via a field-driven target. So yeah, this has turned into quite the robust kind of detailed rig. Like all these different eyeballs facing outward. Something that I kind of want to do is we'll have to make a new eyeball. That's fine. It'll be easy. Copy. I'm going to save, copy the eyeball, Control N for new file, paste. And now we get this, and I will make a full-on eyeball of the same scale. Like so. It doesn't have to be identical, just close. Make that editable. And I just want the full eyeball here. Grow that by 1. Actually, we might even be able to just swap that over. Nope, not quite. Give me that selection, give me that loop, grow. In R25, I think they added this update button, so I can click update, and now it actually updated to the current selection. So that just becomes a new eyeball. I just did all that because I wanted a full model. So when I drop that in to the cloner, now it actually will be the entire eyeball aimed in. I forgot to rotate the axis, which is, I guess we can just tell the cloner to, no, we can't. We have to do the actual axis. I'll turn on the axis. I don't remember which one it was. I think it was this one. Slightly unnerving, but yeah, that was supposed to be 90 degrees. Now they're facing outward. Okay, cool. So now all of these eyeballs, everything should be identical except we actually get the full eyeball, each pushing apart. I just want to get, so they are looking straight out, but now I want to add in one more target. Let's do a random. Let's do a random effector. And yeah, let's say random effector. That will come, if we're doing these in order, it's target, random, delay, random. Random, do not do position, do rotation. And I'll say up to 90, 90, 90. So you can see they're aiming all over the place. And I want these to randomly look in a direction every once in a while. So instead of this being applied everywhere, I will limit it to a field, and the field will be a random field. So now, this random field, can I visualize it? Show a viewport plane. You can see that this is the size of the noise. So under the random field, it's based on the noise. I'll increase that noise. You see it scaling up there. And I want it to be quite large. Yeah, very, very large. And actually, there's a couple things we could do if we want to get real fancy. Do we want to get that crazy? Let's do the simple version right now. So you can see that that's randomly getting applied. We can see that the overall scale is fine. But I only want these to occasionally get applied. So under the random, I'll remap that field. So let's grab this curve. And under the curve, we're not going to see that color update. So we have to use our visual instinct on this. But let's hide that. Under the random, the curve is going to increase the contrast. And then you see all the eyes are like facing properly straight because none of the random noise is catching it. So if we start pulling this in, you see some of the eyes will rotate slightly, right? And if we crank this up, then we can say, okay, the ones that do see it will suddenly rotate and they'll pick a new direction, but it's not going to happen super frequently. So you're going to see that most of the eyes are fine. Every once in a while, one's going to look in like some new random direction and it'll fade out. And then you see it snapping back. And that's via these curves. They're looking out and in. Now that that's happening, we could do, we could do a bunch of different things. But I think I might also want to randomly animate this noise. So when one of those eyeballs is looking, I want the animation speed. I'm gonna set it really fast so we can see it. But yeah, you see how those eyes are like randomly, like kind of twitching around. So we don't want them going that fast. So I'll say 333. I want them to be indexed. So each one has their own noise that they're referencing. And then you can see that any one of them will get in that noise field, and you see it will randomly look around and then start looking straight. So most of the time they're looking straight, but every once in a while they're not. And yeah, just having fun with it. At this point, I could just keep on going and going and going. So yeah, I'll stop this one here for my own purposes. If anybody has any questions, I can, try and add an effect here. I know we went really kind of weird and abstract, but it's a fun and weird eyeball rig. Let's turn on SSAO and then We could even make the material a bit shiny. So here's reflectance. Really, we should be using the new materials, or even a redshift material. But let's remove that, add in a Beckman. Yeah, that's going to get super shiny. That requires a Fresnel dielectric. Yeah, so that gets a little bit shiny there. And then copy, move into here, paste, remove the old one. So yeah, both a little bit shiny. There we go. Automatically, as soon as you add some shine on there, it's going to start looking a little bit creepier. Burp, 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 burp. Now, you know, there's so many additional layers you could do here where you could say every time anywhere one of these eyeballs is, like, it like displace out the geometry a little bit, so it's kind of like passing through it a little bit more. That would, potentially it could run really slowly, but I will spend a second doing that, and I'll check the chat. If anybody has anything to add on top of this, let me know, because right now I am just playing around. So anyway, my thought was, here's that original body, and the Ricochet is still seeing that one, so I shouldn't mess with it, so I will make a brand new one. So here's a copy of this volume mesher, and I don't know if this will work, but what I want to do is inside of the volume builder, I want to add in this cloner with all the eyeballs, and let's see if it acknowledges it. Doesn't seem to be. Not surprised, but I could say use, no, not, I don't want to use the mesh points. So I'll delete that, and we will put this cloner into a connect object. That shouldn't stop the original from rendering. Connect, turn off weld. Maybe it will stop the original from rendering. Okay, well, never mind there. I thought the connect would allow that to happen. We do need to reference that geometry. That's not wanting me to. We could put a matrix following each of those. Like, all this motion could have actually been a matrix, and that matrix might be able to be fed in. I don't think it's worth all the extra time for a small detail. Crossfader saying that in the original example, it felt like they were squishing. I gotta say, I don't feel like... do they feel like they're squishing? If I look at any given shape, I don't feel like the shapes are squishing. I feel like they're moving in and out, and by the nature of their own shape, they're just moving in, they're moving out. And that would account for the weird blobby nature of this shape. So along those lines, we intentionally put the push apart to stop them from intersecting. I'll temporarily turn off the push apart, and that means we don't need the delay, at least for now. And if we made more of these, 22, yeah, it's gonna fill it up quite a bit. Not everywhere, you know, our lines didn't go everywhere. But if we did have another, what effect do I want? Let's go to the cloner, make a plane. The plane is pushing out, but I think we want to push out on Z. Yeah, so you see those pushing out now on Z, maybe even going in, -10. And then that plane effector will be randomly affected by another random field noise, which itself will be decently large. It will be indexed, randomized sample positions. So now each one is being affected differently, so they should be slowly kind of moving in and out. Let's give it some animation speed. So they should be moving in and out. It's a noise, so that always makes the power a little bit less. So let's make the plane effector have a stronger effect. So yeah, these should be pushing in and out. The nature of making them look like eyeballs could be hiding the effect a bit. So I'm going to move the white material in front of the black one. And if we make these large enough, yeah, just by doing that. Okay, so now I guess maybe the delay effector will help stop some of these twitching. So the idea here being, I'm not changing the shape of these at all, but you see how any given shape, there's like a cellular pattern that feels like, oh, it's growing, it's shrinking, it's growing. We're not actually shrinking or growing anything. We're just slowly moving it in and out. And because they're passing through each other, you get a weird kind of morphing, blobbing, blending effect. That's what I think is happening in the reference. I mean, even this looks pretty cool. Blob, 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 blob. Turn the push apart back on. Actually, it's probably going to super explode. Not as badly as I thought it would. And keep in mind, the delay factor is doing a lot of work here to make sure that they're not popping. Here, they're popping really badly. The delay factor is doing a smoother transition between the positions, so that makes it work better in general. But yeah, there's giant eyeballs on it now, so. Yep, gets unnerving as soon as we make them look like eyeballs again. And we're back. Boop. Whoa. Get back in position. Oh, I still have the larger number, so they're getting pushed away. There we go. Ooh. I like it. It's pretty cute. It's cute. Yeah, I agree that there's a teardrop, like a bent teardrop shape in the original one. I was intentionally trying to not be identical to it, so I didn't do it. But pretty cool. Just checking. Trey's asking, quick question: would I prefer or recommend volume mesh modeling or traditional modeling or Boolean modeling? I would essentially never recommend the volume mesh modeling because you're going to get a very uncontrolled mesh. But when it's a mechanical thing, okay, how do I say this? I used a volume builder here, and we use volume builders all the time. I use volume builders all the time. And that's because I don't care what this mesh looks like. For the most part, we're not seeing the mesh. We're only seeing the volume, and I needed a smooth transition between meshes, so that generated it for us. So in that case, this was a perfectly acceptable version of the mesh. But if I was trying to make a character, like you can't work from this mesh for making a character. If I fed this volume mesher, I'll copy, new file, paste. If I wanted this to be a character, we do have the option of dropping this into the ZReMesher. And the remesh is going to try and make these things be like a bit cleaner and make them more quads. I can keep on decreasing this. But you'll even see here that, you know, first of all, it's not going to be perfect. We're going to get some weird triangle areas. It's not going to be symmetrical. And then when it comes to your other example being like, oh, well, if we did Boolean modeling, well, making, it was like maybe even 2 seasons ago, we were trying to make a Nintendo GameCube, and it was really fun. And we were doing it mechanically, traditional modeling and Boolean modeling. So the basics here go, let's even do the simplest possible thing, copy, paste, shrink this down, move it up. So let's say that we wanted to take a bite out of this shape with this one. So if I did this Boolean wise, we say bool, that's A subtract B. So you see we get this really clean subtraction. If you haven't played with this, if you don't have a slightly newer version of Cinema, it's been actually quite a few versions now, but they changed the defaults. They used to have different defaults here. They used to not turn on hide new edges, and you always got what looked like a terrible mesh. Actually, this one's going to be really clean, but you'd always get this terrible looking mesh. But as long as you turn on hide new edges, it's creating n-gons everywhere, and you actually get really clean geometry as long as you go and you make your final cuts properly. So you see we get, like, look how few polygons there are here. Well, we got like 12 polygons total. Now imagine you were doing this with a volume builder. So same process essentially, volume builder, A, and then this will subtract from it. Oh, I guess I gotta swap the order there. So in theory, yeah, one's taking the subtraction of the other, volume mesher. It's like, well, we're not really seeing anything. It's like, oh, we have to crank up the resolution, so let's double the resolution. Still not enough. Double it, you know, keep on doubling it. It's like, okay, now I finally gotten to a spot where if we're looking at the mesh, it kind of looks like the other one. That looks like a nice clean transition from one to the other. But of course, as soon as I hit NB and we take a look at our polygons, we've probably got like 30, you know, 1,000 polygons now instead of 12. And it's like, okay, well, you can do things like grab the mesher and say, hey, let's put some adaptive. Even a little bit's going to go a long way. But this, like now, this is not a very usable mesh. We get all these random triangles. You're not going to be able to do Boolean, or you can't do like nice bevels on it. Like none of that's going to work. And if we feed this into the ZReMesher, it's going to do an okay job. Let's see what it even does. I'm not even sure what's going to happen. So you see it's calculating down here. There's a lot of polygons, so it's got to deal with them all. Okay, it finished, and I guess it is a new mesh. You can see this, but it didn't do much. So let's drop this way down, like 10% of the current. And okay, I tried to clean it up. Let's do 1% of the current. And it's like, yeah, even that, you see, we've lost all the fidelity of it. So if you're trying to do something that is a, you know, a mechanical piece, like say a Nintendo GameCube, like you would never use the volume builder for that because you'd have to increase the resolution so much that it would be such a dense mesh. It'd be crazy. Now, even having said that, if you were making a Nintendo GameCube via volume model, via the volume builder and volume modeling, if you got a crazy deadline, you just need to make this mesh, and you know for a fact that you could make it quickest if you did it with a volume builder. And it's like, I don't care about the mesh density. I gotta get this thing out the door in an hour. I know that the volume builder can do it. It goes through, there isn't a hard and fast rule for any one thing, but you know, if you're making something that you're planning on using in a reasonable way, especially if you're sharing it with other people, like different things need different modeling. And if you're making a character, like mesh flow is super important. So you'd never use the volume builder in that case. Yeah, that's my thought anyway. Let's see. Scrolling. I'm going to check if there's any typed out questions on YouTube. Let's see. Goldhammer is asking, is there a simple way to use a terrain mask to create vertex maps to drive plant growth on a landscape? I'm not sure if terrain mask is a technical term or if that's just like a general way of you mentioning it, but could you use a vertex map as a way of driving plant growth on a landscape? You 100% can. I have a tutorial which isn't exactly covering it, but let me pull it up. Let's see. It just goes to, I'm going to tackle this, but let's search Rocket Lasso plant. I actually should pull it up. There we go. So I've got this tutorial called Controlling Growth Effects in Cinema 4D, Grass, Plants, Anything. And I'll select that and pause it and copy the link. It is going to show, essentially I'm using light to fake erase out or grow plants. So that's a thing. I'll put this link in both chats so you can grab it. But let's go and build the basic version of it. So you can see like some of the core concepts. And yeah, Vertex Map is definitely the way to go. Landscape object. Don't use these too often, but we'll make one. Let's do a different random seed as well. Slightly different mountaintop. Okay, so let's say this is our terrain. We look at our poly count, very reasonable. I think I'll leave it at that, make it editable. And now we're gonna clone a bunch of plants onto it. So I'll make a cloner. The cloner will clone onto an object. The object shall be the landscape. A count of 100 to begin with. Distribution surface. Do not align with the clone, so the plants will all aim straight upward. We need some plants. I'll tell them that they will be multi-instanced. I'll save it just in case. All these files will be available on Patreon. Let's do, yeah, plant growth vertex map. Okay, now something that's handy is if we go inside of our asset browser or content browser, had them as well. There should be a giant section of plants for us. Yeah, if we go to plants, we have European. How do I make that show better? Do you have to stretch it all out? I could be doing something wrong, but I can't move that bar. But yeah, cutouts, we don't want that. There's trees, that's too much. Here's garden exotic. Here's grass elements, and grass elements, low resolution, high resolution. Because we're in a live stream, I will do low resolution, and we'll grab all the different types of plants that we want. Let's do a real fluffy one. I want all of those. We'll grab these fescues. That one's nice, that one's nice. Actually, I've downloaded, all the ones I'm selecting are ones I've downloaded in the past, so I clearly like those. Oh yeah, and you can't, I gotta request this officially in Maxon, but like you can't click all of these and drag them into your object manager, which is frustrating, but you can right click and say load, and they'll all load directly into the scene file. So I'm not sure why we can't drag them in. Anyway, we've got all these different plants. We should check the scale. Oh, actually they're actually larger than I thought they'd be. So that's fine. Selecting all of those, actually I'll save again, drop them into the cloner, and instantly we're going to get a random selection of all those plants traveling around. That's not very many, so let's say 10 times as many. And let's do 10 times as many again. And because we're using multi-instance, like it's actually semi-reasonable to do that type of thing, to make to make that many. It's not going to play back really well, but yeah, now you can see we've got all of these crazy plants cloning all over the place. Now we only want them to clone into certain places. Honestly, I probably want to simplify, but well, even right now you see that there's a uniformity here. You can see it kind of feels like we're seeing the same thing over and over and over again. So a very basic thing to do whenever you're doing this type of setup would be create a random. And the random can do several things for us. Don't do any position, but we do want to do some rotation. We want to spin all the way around. I believe it's the first one, 360 for the top one. And yeah, that was correct. Now they're allowed to spin all the way around. And now, where we kind of saw that repetition before, now they all look different just from that one little change. And then I can say, hey, you're all allowed to randomly rotate whatever, like 11 degrees. So they can all tilt a little bit left or right, forward or back. You can go real extreme with that. We could go all the way up to, let's do 75. And they'll be tilting like way over. I mean, obviously more random, but like I said, small numbers go a long way when it comes to that. Then scale, we don't want to go overboard. We want to do a uniform scale. You could say absolute, and what absolute does is means if we make a bigger number, they all have to be where they are or get bigger. If we say negative numbers, they'll all have to get smaller. And that's if absolute scale is on. If you don't do that, then it's getting larger and smaller at the same time. And so if I just want them to be a little bit bigger, a little bit smaller, then I can leave absolute off. So yeah, we've now added in a ton of randomness just by putting one little random effector, spinning it and scaling it. Okay, so that's all fine. It's not, you can see even as I move my camera, it's not the fastest to calculate. So while we're doing this in the live stream, honestly, probably a lot of what's happening is these are a bunch of different objects. That slows it down a bit. So I might, just for the sake of our speed here, I might delete a bunch of these that are multiple models. And yeah, just by limiting it to these ones that are really clean and simple, you can see how much quicker it's running. So yeah, I didn't want to, but it's just gonna make it easier for me to do this during a live stream. And it is way quicker, so I will double the amount, and that's gonna fill it up more. And because we just got these shorter grasses, I might add a little more randomness. So 0.3, yeah, it did a little bit. Okay, so now we've got something that's going to play back a little bit better. Cool. So now let's move into the world of the vertex map. Turning off random. Actually, no, I want to turn off the cloner. We need a vertex map. Back to the original landscape. Point mode, select any random points, selection, set vertex weights. Doesn't matter what we do because we are immediately turning on the vertex map field, and I'm going to immediately give this a name. Actually, we'll do names later. So now we're using a field inside of the field setting. We can put it whatever we want. Let me take a look at, okay, they did not clarify. Adam Films, welcome. Yes, the stream is back, and the replays are either up on YouTube or will be there soon, so you can definitely catch up. And then to answer your question, Adam, I have not used forester or bridge plants. The native cinema grasses are nice, and often I've just been doing grass stuff. And then I've been doing some Unreal or the mega scans. I did a little bit of that stuff when I needed it, but I haven't gotten into any of the plant grow stuff. And then Insidium has that new plant grower too, which is pretty cool. Anyway, how do we want to control this vertex map? We do have a lot of options. I mean, honestly, one of the most fun ones is just like basic growth. So what I typically do there, let's delete that freeze, create a spherical field is an obvious, simple way. Go to object mode, move up our spherical field NB so I can actually see what we're looking at here. Move this to the tippy top. Actually, this is a really good circumstance to turn on snapping. Shift S will turn on snapping. If I move this around, it's snapping the points. I could just snap boop, right there to the point, hit Shift S again, and now I'm not snapping. So a really quick way of getting there. And all that was just to shrink this down so we get a single point that's already got a little bit of power on it. Yeah, like that. So 1 point. Now, we need to know for our own sanity, how far apart are these points based on the current subdivision? So I select 2 points, and based on those 2 points, I can see that the scale is 6. So they're 6 apart. Now, because of this height difference, they might be a little bit more, but at least we know the approximate, because we didn't know if it was 1 or 0.1 or 100, but it's around 6. Okay, so now we are beginning with a spherical field right there in the center. If I create a brand new freeze, see if I can remember how to do this. We want the freeze to be set to grow, and it's going to grow a radius of 10, that's a fine number, and a effect strength of 100. Actually, the defaults right now are fine. If I play, is it going to grow? I don't know. It might not. Okay, it totally is. Okay, so the default, by amazing coincidence, the default's working just fine for us. I want to grow slower. So we don't want to shrink the radius, but making the effect like only 1/10 as powerful is going to go a long way here. So when I hit play, now you see it's growing at 1/10 the speed. It's a smoother transition as it goes. We need a lot more frames, 999, and now that's allowed to slowly grow over time. But you're going to see there's kind of a diamond pattern happening. It's just a natural way that these polygons are distributed. It's the way that it stretches out. Essentially, it's actually pretty clear. If you look at the original shape we have, it's kind of a diamond shape. And because that's the origin shape, it's going to kind of keep echoing that shape as it goes further out. Having said that, I want to add some variation onto it. So we can control the radius via a subfield. And the way you do subfields in 25 and 26 is you twirl it down and you can see that there's a radius here. So I would like to feed that a random field inside the radius, and we want to make that larger. Actually, we could see it kind of clearly here, so I'll pull it out just so we can scale it up and you see the scale of the noise. We could change it to a different noise type, like something super messy like Luca. Luca can be made even larger. So yeah, you see we kind of got this nice random noise pattern. I am going to animate it slowly, so we'll give it a speed of 11, and it's going to, if I play right now, you see, oop, it's still growing, so I'll turn that off. So you can see that this noise is slowly animating over time. And I think that that can be pretty handy. And that's affecting the radius. So we'll drag that into the radius. So it's actually affecting it. So now, essentially, that's a multiplier on the radius. And it's going to make it smaller. But because it's making it smaller, we should probably make the radius larger. If we play right now, it'll probably work. But I imagine it's going to be pretty choppy. Yeah, even right now, you're almost seeing nothing's happening because it needs to hit a really bright color in the random field for it to even work at all. So I'm going to double the radius. Okay, now you saw actually still almost nothing grew because it just didn't happen to be hitting that moment where the random was doing anything. And eventually it did hit a point where it's bright enough and it's moving. So we should probably find different random ones. But because of that random noise, you see that our pattern is a lot more chaotic when you get these cooler edges as they're going. And by animating the noise, you see like right here is really dark, but eventually the noise will animate into such a way that it did cover it all. You've got additional options, things you can do to stop that from happening. I've never done it, but I wonder if we could put a grow on top of the grow. So like this one is naturally going to be slowly doing its thing, but then we get another one on top of it that's going to move really slowly, but it means it can never stop. So that's kind of an experiment I want to do. So here's a second freeze. I would like it to grow based on 10, and I'm going to go real slow. It's only like 2%. But remember, like nothing, let's see if this works, because in the beginning, how many frames do we get? I play and nothing's happening at all until around, okay, it wasn't until like 200 frames that anything happened. So if we turn on the second freeze, that's doing its own natural growth based on what's below. So if I play, that should immediately start slowly growing outward. But then the one underneath it should eventually be able to do its thing and take over. Let's see. It's a little uniform still. Is that overriding it entirely? I guess maybe this freeze is not seeing that freeze. Can we do that? If I say add, yeah, it goes a little bit too quick. I mean, it is kind of the best of both worlds, but we might need to slow both of them down. Maybe the add's not a good idea. Actually, yeah, the add's creating a feedback loop. We don't want to do that. It's kind of an experiment. It didn't super pan out. My instinct here would be we just choose different random noises until we get one seed that's working right at the beginning. So if I just click a different seed and we rewind, you see that this one does start right at the beginning. So, okay, they're done. The whole point here is we're making a nice slow transition where this is slowly growing. So, you know, working just fine. Now is a larger amount. We could drop the effect strength down smaller. If we go smaller, it's still going to grow, but you see we get this longer transition. Do you see how, you know, we get yellow and then red and a more orange in between is essentially the point I'm trying to make there. The smaller the effect, but the smaller the effect strength is also the slower it's going to travel. So we have other options there. If we go back to 10, it's going to grow at a reasonable rate. Again, I think it's a good rate there. So let's call this tag our base grow. and then duplicate that tag. So now we're dealing with a second vertex tag, and let's call this one blur. You have to call them different names. If they have the same name, then it doesn't work, because then it gets confused what tag it's referencing, because I think certain things are referencing the tags by name, not by link. Okay, anyway, in this tag, under the fields, I don't want any of the stuff we already made. So we got essentially a blank field. What I want this field to do is import the other field. And this field is now transferring everything based on the newest point. We could even say I want to transfer it based on the index. And now it's going to perfectly match what the other one is. But what I actually want to do is average them. So it's essentially taking in all the other points and blurring them based on a radius of 100. So it's looking at any other points within 100, adding up all the values, dividing it by probably how many points are in that range, and that is what the average becomes. So if we are now blurring that result, now you see as I increase it, you see how the entire area is orange, and slowly it turns yellow, and the red very slowly is transitioning into orange. So we get this really long transitional point. So that's what we were going for there. Now we can set that to whatever range we want by controlling this radius, but I think it's working pretty well. Okay, so if that is now what we want, where we want it to grow, let's grab the cloner and reactivate it. And that's going to grow all the plants. Still a little slow. And that's even set to multi-instance, right? Yeah, that's, let me hit save. I want to see if we can get that to go any quicker. If not, I'm probably going to simplify it even more. So let's say, I don't think render instance is going to be quicker than multi-instance, but you never know. And let's go to regular. Maybe there's something extra calculation-wise it's trying to do. I don't think regular instance was the way to go. I did just hit save, so we should be fine. Yeah, that one's just taking forever. So I might simplify it even more so that we can get real-time feedback before we put in the final plant. It's doing the initial calculation for the instance. There we go. Now it woke up and went to the multi one, so you just have to be patient there. Yeah, so, okay, cloner. I guess I would just turn off the cloner. Let's hide the landscape for a moment. Find one of these plants. And what's the best way to do it? Honestly, even just doing a cube. I'm going to shrink a cube until the cube is, you know, kind of roughly the size. You know, just eyeballing it, make it editable, set the axis to 0, so it's pivoting from the same spot as those plants. And then just as a temporary like holding spot for us, we'll just clone a bunch of cubes. Should run way quicker. Boop, 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 because it's way less polygons. So yeah, you can see they're eating up the field, but you know, we get a good idea of what they would be filling up. Okay, cool. So we've got a landscape that's growing. I want this random, I want the cloner to be affected by a plane effector. That plane effector is going to pretty much just control the scale. So let's grab the scale in a uniform, absolute way. I want this to be scaled down to -1. So everything's been shrunk down to nothing. It doesn't exist anymore. So that's going to apply everywhere. We don't want it to apply everywhere. We only want it to apply some places. So under the field, I would like it to reference, actually, before dragging that in, I'm going to hit play. And let's get it to a point where we can actually see something. I'm going to turn off the cloner because even that's taking a little bit. Okay, we can definitely see something there. So now, okay, plane effector, grow, or drag in the vertex map, the second one, the blur, and now instantly see that what's happened is where the vertex map is, everything has disappeared. So now we're erasing out growth from that spot. We want the opposite effect. So pretty straightforward. We could do it inside the vertex map, but even right here inside of our actual plane effector, I can say, I would like you to invert the result. And now they're only grown where, yeah, they're only grown in the opposite places of where the vertex map was saying that they should be. And I don't expect this to run super fast, unfortunately. But you can see it when I hit play, we're going to get this nice slow growth traveling across as they go. So yeah, that's ready for us to swap out the plant if we like it. I wish we were getting a little bit better frame rate. I mean, this is a lot of plants going, and the vertex map is probably not trivial to calculate. There are alternative methods we have. Let's see. Yeah, the vertex map by itself is dropping us down to like 42 frames per second, which isn't the crazy fastest. We do have other options. Actually, I do like doing this. So let's, I'll save this as the next version, actually. So I'll turn that on. So if somebody wants to go to that scene file, they can. Now I'll save this as the next version, 2B. And instead of the cloner looking at the secondary growth where we were blurring it, I'll delete that tag. And now let's just go and reference the original one. So in the plane, I don't want to see that other vertex map. I want to see this original one. So that's the original one. So what this means is there's almost no transition here. Like it's going to be a really harsh transition of growth. So now when I rewind and hit play, we're going to get a bunch of initial growth. But you see these are going to like snap into position really quick. And keep in mind, we're only running at like 4 frames a second. So even though if this feels slow, it's going to be running like 15 times faster, like in real time. So you see we get this really harsh transition where it's kind of like they're not there and a tiny bit of growth. So let's say we wanted more growth. Instead of getting it from the vertex map, we can do it via the plane effector. And that can be done via the awesome, we could do delay or decay. I'll do a delay. And the delay is just the what do you call it? The delay effector. It's the exact same idea. Here's the linear, the smoothing, and the spring. So if we put a whole bunch of smoothing in here, it's going to smooth out everything that comes underneath it. So currently, this is really harshly transitioning from one shape to another. That's going to say, slow down that transition. So instead of having 2 vertex maps, let's see what we get. Remember, it's going to be hard to keep in mind, but that growth where it's got, like they're growing really quick before the next one. And let's see if this is working. Yeah, definitely already you can feel that there's a longer transition. Look, it's going all the way from there all the way back to this position. It's still going. So it's a way longer transition for the growth to happen. So, you know, that type of thing can be really powerful, really cool. Get that type of variety going. And then I'm going to push it pretty far. Let's push that all the way up to like 95. So some of those are going to go crazy slow. And then, just for fun, in the delay, there's also the effect strength. So let's try dragging in that same random effect. Oh, that's not a random effector, that's a random. Inside this, I'll copy in that same noise, that same random field. So now this effect strength is being multiplied by that. You know what? I'm going to strike that and instead do a new random field. And this new random field, I can just do whatever scale I want. So I will leave a purlin. It's going to be relatively small, but I would like to see a really heavy contrast there. There's no easy way of visualizing it. I just know that there's not very heavy contrast in there. Under remapping, I could say I would like it to curve, and just based on the way I know noises, I want there to be heavier contrast. So if I pull that in a bunch, pull this in a bunch, then essentially we've increased the contrast of the noise. So by multiplying that, we've said, okay, a bunch of those should be really slow, but some of them should be faster. And the hope now is, and it's going to take a while to see the transition because it has to start from the next state. So let's give it a second. But the hope is that some of them are going to look like they're growing way faster than the other ones. So yeah, so start looking at like the bleeding edge here. Let me zoom up. And yeah, so see how that one's way smaller than that one, even though, and that one came after it, but it's taking longer to go. And hopefully we get to, yeah, look, see that one right there, really tiny still, while these other ones are growing. So we get more variety as they're going by randomly affecting the delay effector. So yeah, a bunch of variety in how much those are growing. You gotta be careful about how much you do in the contrast of the noise there, but yeah, that, you know, extra variety is always gonna be nice. And look at this really great pattern that we're getting now, where like these tendrils are coming out early, but we still have over here, some of them are still finishing up growing, but we've got other ones that are like extra growing there. So it's so much power and variety just from those. And you know, it's not gonna play quickly, but I can easily swap out that block for our different bits of grass and an A. And now we see the finals here, and yeah, those will all be growing in that exact same way. So yeah, just by, I mean, I know we layered up a bunch of different things, but there is not much stuff here in the object manager. And by tweaking key settings here, you can get a lot of control over exactly the way this growth is going to be happening. Let's see. E-Gold Hammer had, let's see if they had asked a question. I want to see what they're thinking. It also just started like pouring rain here. I don't know if you can hear it. I think that using a vertical linear field, you could get the same elevation specific effect you're looking for with the terrain mask. Is there something to account for the slope too? Good question. Very good question. There is getting parametric version of like the concave shapes or slopes is not easy. We could do a shader field. I don't know if it does acknowledge a shader field. We're just playing with Vertex Maps now. So here's the overall concept. I'm going to save that. Copy the landscape, paste into a new file. So now we've got this simplified version. I just want to play with the Vertex Maps a bit. So I guess we don't even need those. So here's the thought. If I do a shader field, can we feed a fall off shader in, and does that work? I don't know that it does. This is not looking promising. Oh, nope, it is working. Okay, so by dropping in the shader field and then putting a fall off into it, this is now saying, hey, if something is sharper, if something is steeper than a particular angle, like erase it out. So it's almost like, imagine this is snow. Anywhere that there's yellow would be snow. And everything that's red is really steep, so the snow would slide off of it. So this by itself is now kind of let us mask out certain areas that shouldn't have growth just by doing, yeah, a simple shader field, which worked. Yeah, I didn't remember if that worked or not, but it does seem to, so it's kind of cool. And then, oh, yeah, yeah, you're asking about the terrain mask. If you are referring to what I think you're referring to, yeah, this thing, I have never gotten it to work. Oh, well, just clicking it, if it did refresh properly, it seems like this shader does very similar things. Where you see, do you see how when I clicked from one to the other, it's almost identical? So I went to the simple mathematical one, and this is a fancier tool that, in theory, yeah, you see that's blurring out the edge, and then we can, yeah, blur those out. So, you know, this might be the same idea. Actually, this is the first time I've ever gotten this tool to actually do something for me. And yes, you get your minimum slope, your maximum slope, and yeah, just a way of doing the same thing. Maybe a little more controllable. I'm not sure about these altitudes. Max out. If I start pulling this down, I imagine they'll start like cropping things out eventually. Yeah, so that'll crop it out, so it's only doing a certain level, so not be above a certain elevation. Okay, it's cool to know that this tool actually does something. I never was able to get to do anything on a regular piece of geometry. But seeing it interactively here in the Vertex map is definitely helping. Yeah, so there it goes. There's even the noise height. I imagine that would just add in some randomness. Yeah, that's just adding in a little bit of extra variation. Change the noise scale. Not much variation. Not much control there. In a lot of ways, I'd rather control it myself. But getting some of the, if we got rid of the noise, this is nice. It's nice being able to blur those edges. Don't worry about bump. That's a direction. Doesn't matter. Hardness. I don't. Okay, that seems to like crank up the contrast. These are all things that we could do in regular fields. Invert, yeah, it's perfectly fine. And then even this might be a remap on it. Yeah, so it's a full transition if we want to go up, down on something. So, interesting. That's how Terraform works. Terraform FX works. Yeah. So yeah, that's cool. It combines and you're able to limit certain areas to have it or not. So I learned a little something. Actually got that shader to work. Let's see, follow-ups to this thing. Is there a way of baking a vertex map? Zach, what do you mean by bake a vertex map? Because is it to bake somewhere else? On this vertex map itself, what's interesting is if I just say, hey, don't use fields anymore, the last thing it was at is what's there now. That is now, that's there. It's ready to go. I could, if you double click on a vertex map, it'll open up the paint tool. And now I could take that and just paint on it. And if I hold down control, I can erase out from it. So it's just, it's been baked down just by turning off the field. So that's a thing. And then, you know, if you turn your field back on, actually, I'm not sure if it would remember. Let's try. I'm going to erase out and turn on a field. I imagine it'll erase it out. Nope, it didn't erase it out. So my assumption is it created, yeah, it created a brand new freeze property here. So it's, they hard coded in when you turn it on, it creates a freeze. So that freeze now remembers the current state. If I delete the freeze, then we're right back to the original shader. Oh, you mean, yeah, could we cache it? Interesting. I don't know that we can cache a vertex map. At the same time, I wouldn't be surprised if the Alembic file could see it, and then we could bring that back in, and then if we could read that vertex map, I guess that is the question. So the quickest way to find out would be go back to our plant growth, copy our growing landscape in. If I select this, then we're going to get our, I got to clear out, copy pasting it. If I clear, it should work. 999. Oh, let's add. There we go. So now we get this growth, and your question is, can we bake that out? I shall right click and bake as Alembic. We have to save somewhere. Let's go to, oh, why did I have to go into this menu? I don't even know where to go from here. Fine, desktop, save. Okay, so that's now baked there. Now you see there is a vertex map there. Now in theory I should be able to delete the original object. If we hit play, okay, if we hit play, it is playing, and we're at a really high speed, and a vertex map is there. So then it turns into can other objects read that? So the easiest way to do it is I'll copy back in the original landscape, visually hide the Alembic in this old vertex map. I'm going to delete all reference to anything and say, actually, you are referencing this Alembic vertex map. So if we see the exact same thing here, then we are able to transfer the Alembic baked version of it and then do work with it. And we can. So there you go. You can bake it by baking out to Alembic, and Alembic handles a animated vertex map. So now you'll see that before, just to do that, it was taking 43 frames, and now transferring it from that one into a fresh one, even to do modifications, is more than twice as fast. And then, yeah, if we delete this and just look at the original, which is an even better comparison, we went from, what was it, 44 frames, and now we're at 250, sometimes 200. So yeah, way quicker. So yeah, good thing to put in there. Yeah, Alembic baking is so good. So yeah, that works awesome. Just seeing if there's any follow-up. Oops, did not mean to click that. I'm just seeing if there's any follow-ups to this question before we move on. What time is it? We have about a half hour left. Scrolling. Yeah, looks like we can just move on to a new question. It was nice to retackle this and learn a couple new things. Baking to Alembic there, very handy. I mean, you know, I always hate baking things down, but if you have something locked in, it's not going to change, then it's really great to be able to bake it down. And if you had to, you could always probably even make this editable. Actually, if you make it editable, I bet the fields wouldn't come back again, but regardless. Okay, let's click a link. Behava has put a Behance link. Mute the tab. Let's see what we got. So still seemingly. Okay, this is from what looks like Japanese name, so I cannot even attempt to say it. Ooh, look at that. Very cool. So this is doing text, but obviously not English. Or would it be kanji? I don't even know. But yeah, we get these really nice patterns, but then we get some geometry happening on top of it. And it does seem to be like random. You see some of them don't get it and some do. So, and I'm trying to think, but you know, this does feel like it would use a little bit of node stuff, not too much. But let's move this over. A fine one to tackle. Shouldn't take too long. So let's just do, how do I want to do it? Give me the outside. Actually, that's one of the interesting tidbits on this. Yeah, let's do it. Okay, so let's make a letter R. We'll make it beefy. I should change the default here to go onto like lemon milk. And go deeper. Okay. So we take that basic shape, and there's a couple interesting elements to this. If we take that shape and I feed it into the obvious thing is a Voronoi fracture, but I think we have to do some more elements here. So that's getting all super broken apart. That's fine. Totally what we were expecting. Now we need a whole bunch of them. We're going to subdivide that quite a bit. Let's do like 200. Nope, not even close. Let's do 500. All right, we're going to do 1,000 of them. Okay, so that's starting to feel like kind of the size of them. Honestly, they're still probably a little large. It's running relatively quickly, so I'll do double the amount again. So yeah, now we've got about the right size. But we're getting all these really... we're getting this flat shape on the outside. So what we really want is only the interior ones. If it's on the outside, we don't want to see it. Now, trying to think of, what does inside mean? Okay, that's not what yeah, that makes sense. Now, none of these settings are going to give us what we want, but keep in mind, this is a effector. This is a Mograph object, so we can feed effectors in. So my first thought is, let's feed in a plane effector. And the plane effector does not affect position. It will affect the scale uniformly, absolutely, in a -1 sort of way. So now everything's scaled down to nothing. Then, in the field, we'll feed the letter itself in as a point object. And that point object is going to be based off of the surface. Does volume do anything for us? I'm going to give this a save. I'm a little worried that I'll do some combination I've never done before and it'll take too long to calculate. Inside Voronoi. Save. Okay. So volume, clip to shape. Yeah, I don't think that's going to do it. So we have to do surface, and we're going to give it radius. But what we really need here is a whole bunch of contrast. So we can do a little bit here. And then I want to take that text object and curve. I like having control via curve. I'm going to crank this up. And I think I'm doing that right. Actually, we'll just go to the midpoint here. So you see that I'm going to say that the contrast is crazy high. So now, as I increase the radius of this, it's pretty much like it's got to be on or off. Not fully, but pretty much on or off. So now as I increase this from the surface, it's getting to the midpoint of each of those different chunks. And as we cross through the midpoint, we are getting left with just this interior. So all the outer ones have been shrunk down, and now we get this nice chunky inside, which is a really cool effect. I've never seen specific reference to something like that. This contrast, I want it to be a 100% contrast. It's not quite. I wonder if we can do, quantize. Yeah, quantize will do it for us. If we say quantize and we drop it down to one step, that's going to be full contrast. It's almost exactly what I did, except there's no tiny transition. It's like black or white. So you see there's no longer any transition. So yeah, this goes back again to, we can just crank the radius to this size where we're barely going to get rid of everything. Like right there, I feel like that's a last flat one on the outside. So just by getting large enough to go in, then she erase it out. There might be one or two stragglers, but you just increase the radius, or we'd have to crank up the number, the point distribution, so that we get fewer of them. So yeah, I think almost instantly we're getting the core effect. Just pushing it further for fun. I mean, we could keep shrinking this until we get, even more interior. It's going to keep making the letters skinnier and skinnier. And now we've got a final bit of geometry here. So doing a quick save on that, that could be, I'll probably just connect it down. Is that even a thing inside of here? Could we say that's colorized fragments? I guess they had to be exploded in order to disappear via the plane. So we can't rebake that down, but we can feed that into a connect. Don't worry about welding. So this has now become a single mesh. And if we wanted to do those little extrusions, we can do it any way we want. I think leaving this parametric, let's try this. So I'm going to put that into a null, and let's open up the operators. And in the operators, I want a geometry modifier. I want to see it as a list, really tiny. Okay, so here's all the different things we can do. I guess the simplest thing would be, let's just extrude. I will, let's say, just to be careful. Dragging it into this null will hopefully, okay, it is going to take a little bit to calculate, but I was expecting that. Hopefully it doesn't take too long to calculate. Okay, it's in. It should be applying to everything, extruding out 20. Okay, there, it took a bit to do, but it did do it. Okay, so what's happening here? Because it looks a bit crazy. Oh, no, it seems to be correct. So you see everything extruded outward by 20, and everything's really tiny now, so it's super extreme. In order to do this more sensically, I'm going to turn that off, and temporarily, let's keep on increasing this until we have like almost nothing. I just want like a couple. There we go. So now we can like test it when there's only a couple polygons. So save that again. Turn back on the connect to weld it down. Turn on the extrude, and it should hopefully pretty quickly refresh. Okay, that's nowhere near as fast as I would hope it would be. That was surprisingly long considering how few objects we have. I think, unless the connect should... a bunch of them are tiny, but were they gone? I gotta do a quick test just to see. Under our plane effector, I'm gonna say that I want it to affect the visibility, but that does the opposite. Yeah, that just makes them all disappear. Don't want to do that. I'm gonna try welding. It's maybe not a good idea, but let's try welding. That might obliterate a bunch of things disappear. Turn on the extrude. No faster. No, it did seem a little faster. What I'm thinking is there might be some really tiny polygons, and still trying to like calculate those, and I don't know if it's programmed to ignore them or not. But in any case, now we get this extrusion. We can click on the extrude, and the simple thing would be like a -0.5, and you're going to see it. You know, every single polygon is going to extrude inward. But before the extrude, why don't we pull in a inset? So here's an inset. Before dragging it in, I'll set it to, actually it's set to 20%, which is pretty good. I'll say 10%. That comes first, so that will inset, and you see that lovely little inset. And then I'll say extrude. Now, does the extrude apply everywhere? That's really hard to tell. Yeah, it's not super interactive to drag. 0.1, give me a tiny one. Yeah, that's applying everywhere, so that's not surprising. So what we need to do is limit our selection a bit. So right now, I've explained this before, but you never know who's seen what. So when it comes to selection, these are capsules, which essentially they're nodes for the new scene nodes. And you can take a scene node and drag it directly in and affect things now, which is cool. Anyway, we have to do some selections, but you have to think about the way Cinema does selections. Right now, if I make this cube editable and we go to polygon mode, you'll see nothing is selected. And if nothing is selected, and I hit the letter D for extrude, and I click and drag, because, let me turn on don't preserve groups. So nothing is selected, but if I click and drag, everything extrudes. So in Cinema, if nothing is selected, it also acts as if nothing is selected. And keep in mind, when I just made this editable, nothing was selected. So if nothing is selected, now we do this extrusion, everything, well, now nothing is still selected, which means it's kind of like everything is selected. So if I select all and extrude, watch the difference here. Actually, let me do it properly. I'm going to deselect all. So Control Shift A. If I click and extrude all, everything extruded. Now if I click again to extrude, again, every single polygon that exists is going to extrude outward. Keep in mind, see this little kind of like three-sided, I guess now six-sided, but like this little triangle shape that got made. So as I drag out, pay attention to that. Now instead, I'm going to select all the polygons. So now when I do an extrusion, it's like, oh, we pretty much got the same extrusion. But now look, I don't have nothing selected. I have something selected, which means when I do the next extrusion, only the current selection goes. Very important to keep that in mind. So with that being in mind, let's go back into the actual file and wait for it to pop back in. So right now, the connect object is pretty much making it editable, and that means nothing is selected. So the first thing we need to do is select something. So I'm going to go to Geometry Selection and say, I would like to let's see, isn't there just a, yeah, here's just a regular old select. That'll be the first thing that happens. And what do I want to select? Well, I want to have polygons and I want to select all. So if I'm doing that correctly, this should now have selected all of the polygons. So now that all of them are selected, when I do the inset, only the selected ones are going to shrink in. And now the selection has shrunk in to that inner bit. Is that going to give me an active selection? No, I wish it did. So now that those went in, now when I hit extrude, the hope is that instead of everything extruding, you see now only the inset extruded. So it's a very different behavior if you select everything or don't select everything. But because it's kind of all happening invisibly behind the scenes, it's really easy to not know what's happening. So now we say minus 0.2, and now only those insets are getting extruded in, not everything. And yeah, with that having worked, now instead of selecting all, which is what that was doing for us, let us do a random selection. And I'll just drag that in. And that is now randomly selecting 50% of the polygons. And then based on that 50% selection of, actually, is that going to transfer my, oh, okay, it did work. You see there's one back here. It just happens to be the seed that we had. So if I do a different seed, yeah, they went. Okay, I just happened to get a unlucky seed or lucky seed. So now in approximately 50% of polygons will be selected, which means they then get inset, and those ones that inset would then get extruded. We don't need to select anymore. And now that that all seems to be working, let's turn all of those off. Don't need that anymore. Back to the plane, shrink. Oh, that's interesting. This connect object is apparently quite a bit of the calculation time as well. Ooh, it's probably all those freaking selection tags. I gotta, Rick, if you happen to be watching the stream right now, at a certain point in the Voronoi fracture, we've always had the option to create these selections, but at a certain point, the selection started always existing. So if I take this Voronoi fracture and make it editable, and I go inside of it, you're going to see all these selections, and selections take forever to calculate and forever to refresh. But I don't know why those would already be existing if we have checkboxes to activate them. So what's happening, I think, and the reason why this is going so slow, is this connect object is seeing 2,000 different things, each one of them with like a dozen different selection tags, and it's trying to merge all of them down. That's a huge amount of calculation, and as far as I can tell, there's no reason why all those tags should be existing all of the time. That's why I think this connect object is taking so long. Okay, having said that, that should have now baked it down. There's probably still a ton of selection tags going on, but we can mostly ignore them. Connect object, I'll say manual for the font tag, and then we can drag a font tag there and actually limit it to something pretty sharp. So let's say, yeah, that fixes the font. And now we can reactivate all of these modifiers and NA, and there we go. There's a completely parametric version of, I think, exactly what the reference was doing. We could change the random selections. We could change the inset percentage. So let's inset those like 30% with a 50% variation, and then extrude them up to minus 0.4. We don't go too far, with a variation of 50%. And then everything has to refresh. No, it doesn't take too long. SSAO, get a little depth in there. And then, yeah, as soon as we set this up to render, then we get all these lovely little shapes. And then that entire final shape could be beveled or whatever we want to do to sharpen it up. And there we go. Nailed it. Okay, excellent. Yeah, good question. I like that one a lot. I'm scrolling through. I'm going to see if there's anything else happening. I mean, there's different random colors. We probably didn't have to bake it down in the connect, and we could have been maintaining colors. And of course, this entire thing could be fed into a fracture right now. Oh, it wasn't cinema, so we did it, you know, we did it in an unrelated way. But yeah, look at that. It's pretty much perfectly matching. So quite pleased. And keep in mind, completely parametric setup, like very simple setup overall. I mean, we did it very specifically, but we can always go right back to this text object and, you know, let's change it to letter M. It's going to take a while because it's got, well, actually that was surprisingly fast, all things considered. Yeah, so we can just type in whatever letter we want. Let's go to a good old favorite ampersand. And instantly it's going to generate the new letter and everything propagates through because it's perfectly parametric. Any questions? We've got about 8 minutes, which isn't a lot. But I might be able to answer a question or two, especially if it's not a cinema one. Mick, I do agree that use island is a really good idea with inset and extrude. There's this use island. In this case, we didn't want to use island because we wanted each individual polygon doing their own thing. But otherwise, use island is great if you're doing like a flat plane or a rectangle or something, or a cube. Dennis was asking earlier if hull only would have done anything. Hull only is a great setting, but it wouldn't do what we wanted in this case. Copy. I did save that, right? Yeah, I'll just save that as a final. New file, paste. So what hull only will do is right now everything is a volume. So if I go inside, you see it. We're flying through a bunch of different chunks. Hull only is really powerful, but all it does, if I say hull only, is the inside is now empty. So it's just like the outer shell here. So, you know, it's like a cracked eggshell look. So pretty cool, but wouldn't have resulted in the other effect that we had. Although having said that, I don't know what hollow object means. What does hollow object mean? Does it... very difficult, but no, we still seem to be inside a piece. I don't know for sure, but I kind of want to know what that means, and if it means what I think it means, that'd be kind of cool. Let's swap this to a sphere. And does that mean that the inside of this will be hollow? And it's only the outer one that's there. No, we still seem to be flying through pieces. We're not inside of a big chamber inside. Oh, no, that kind of feels like a bit of a chamber. A little hard to tell. Sneeze. Excuse me. If we were able to, if that did what I thought it was going to do, and we were able to do a hollow object and then an invert, but I don't think that actually works that way. Yeah, invert is for offset fragments, which is also very powerful. The fracture object is so, this is such a well-designed tool, the Voronoi fracture. Dean, Elaine might have already answered for you, but let's see. Is there a way to use motion capture rigs in the asset browser without using a downloaded T-pose from Miximo? I mean, why wouldn't you be able to? They're just joints, right? If we open up a file, assets browser, the wonderful, go to all, and we got motion capture. Inside of there, we can grab the motion captures, and let's grab, let's go morbid. Let's grab dying. That one looks dramatic. Download. Downloading, 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 ding. Okay, let's see what we get. So this is just the skeleton, but yeah, keep in mind, this is just a series of joints, so why wouldn't we be able to use it? Let's see what we got. Hit play. Whoop. And oop, we need some more frames. We gotta see the death. Whoop. And that's pretty good. Oop, come on. Okay, now they're dead. But yeah, these are just joints. So we can click on, go to reference pose, which will put it into a T-pose, and we're not very well set up for it, but if we make a figure, which doesn't quite hit the right scale, let me make that editable, and grab the torso. I'm just gonna fake it and move that up, so it's gonna be sloppy, but you know, there we go. And I put that into a connect, bake it down. Can we, I'm gonna middle mouse click, so I've grabbed all the children, select the mesh, character, and bind, and that should have automatically created all the different components. Now as soon as we change the time, yeah, there we go. Rigged figure. No Miximo required. Dead. It's okay. He's okay. Look. You're back. Yeah. So, but yeah, nice, perfect little question. You have an additional question from Elaine FX. Some motion capture. If you use it in the solver, my character will turn and bend in a cray direction. I'm assuming you mean crazy direction? I could be wrong. That might be some terminology I don't know. Even if you set pose. If you use some motion capture and the character turn and bends in the crazy direction, even if you set pose. That sounds like a very specific situation. And here's the trick, and I'm sure everybody here has experienced it. When something is broken, and you're like, oh, it's broken, it's not working. And then later on, you're like, oh, person who might have an answer for me. Let me show you, I can break it. It's almost impossible to intentionally break something again. Like, things break when nobody else is looking. Once somebody's looking, you can't get it to break. So without me being able to be in the situation where that was breaking, like if this was suddenly flipping around backwards, then yeah, we could do it. Having said that, you gotta be careful when you're scaling things. Scaling anything really in cinema. If you're doing a scaling, you can break things. If I were to scale things, you're gonna see, like in this case, the character's gonna get really skinny. But if you scale like different parts of the body, you could get like inversions. Oh my goodness, this was not intentional, but let's do that. See what happens. That worked surprisingly well. Sometimes I don't know how this stuff still works. It's pretty crazy. Yeah, sorry. I can't recreate the problem, so it won't be exact. Sneezed at the same time. Badger, welcome. Haven't seen you in a while. You put a motion into the solver. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm not sure what you even mean by solver in this instance. What does solver mean? AJ is asking about have priorities explained. Priorities are pretty straightforward. They're just meticulous. And then B. Havana has a very good question about Slicer, which I'd be very happy to answer. I kind of want to do a quick exploration, or rather a quick explanation of priorities. I'm trying to think of, again, it's difficult to make a bad example to fix it. Okay, I've got a maybe somewhat simple example. Okay, so priorities are most important when you're building some sort of rig. And when I say rig, I even more so mean like a character rig, if you were animating a character. So here's my current thought. If I make a very simple elbow joint, so that is, you'll do that, and then let's give it a hand as well. So that's a shoulder, elbow, wrist, and then a hand, okay? So let's even rename that hand. That'll be the elbow. Okay, so rigging that up, it's probably gonna invert. This is a weird, it's not a weird thing, it makes sense. Okay, I know how to do what I want to do. I'm gonna make a null and move it out to be exactly where the wrist goes, okay? And then I'm going to grab this elbow and I'm gonna rotate it 5 degrees. The reason I'm doing that is when we go and rig up a character, it doesn't know if the elbow should bend up or down. It doesn't know what direction it should be. So by pre-bending it, it now knows what direction to bend. But you have to be precise with your numbers if you want to work, as well as hopefully it's about to. Okay, okie dokie. Rigging IK, simple IK setup. The IK wants to know where the end of the IK is, and the end of it will be the, not the hand, but the joint, so the wrist. And then we need the goal. The goal is the one thing we made already, so I'll drag that in, and instantly it should snap down, and now hopefully it bends the way we actually want it to. And that should be all we need to do. Oh, and then we need a pole. So that's the direction that the elbow goes. So if I pull that down, it shouldn't look any different. But now when I grab this null, which is actually the hand control, you can see that the elbow bends down and it's bending in the way that I had pre-bent it. So anyway, you can see we get this really nice movement where that arm is bending like an arm. So I'm going to hit undo, and then usually not a good idea, but I'm going to put my null into a null. Let's call this one, yeah, hand 0, and then hand. And the reason I'm doing that is so, like, if I move the hand around and then forget, I can just hit reset transform. It'll jump back to 0. You can also freeze the transformation, but I didn't want to freeze it out in space. Okay, so that is doing its thing. Dang it, I'm trying to think of a way to make this break, because what I'm about to do is going to automatically work. Because now I want the hand to follow my control. So you see that there's a forward direction, but the hand is going to keep on pointing in whatever direction the elbow was pointing. So if I right-click on the hand and say I want to add a rigging constraint tag, I'm going to say, okay, your transform. Actually, there's a couple things that are interesting here. I don't know if they're going to answer the question. If I say position rotation, which is the default of the constraint transform, and I say that that should link to the hand, then, oh, whoops, undo. I meant to put that on the wrist, not the hand. So if I tell the wrist to go wherever the hand is, I'm saying both move the position and the rotation, which is fine for right now. Let's see if this breaks. So look, here's where it's interesting, where this is going to break. If I pull this, you see how the arm is suddenly getting really long? It's like, well, why is the arm getting really long? Well, it's because this is calculating first. So it is told to calculate expression 0. It comes first in the hierarchy. This one comes later, the same expression 0, but it comes after it, so it'll calculate after. So it's saying, like, I don't care what this tag said to do. I now want you to move exactly where the hand is. So in this constraint tag, I'm going to say, I don't want you to actually go where the position is. I just want you to follow the rotation. And so now this hand's position is entirely based on wherever this tag told it to go. So what's kind of cool about that is now when I take this and stretch it too far, the hand gets stuck and left behind, so it can't get pulled longer. So I can easily know when I'm animating a character if I went too far. Now there's other things you could do in our control that could make it like a bendy, stretchy rig. I'm not going to do that here. But anyway, just by adding in that tag and this tag, I now have the ability to move the arm, and the hand is static, which means I can now independently rotate the hand without the arm being worried about it, and move the arm without the hand changing rotation. So what's cool about that setup is if you had, you know, if here's some sort of surface, so now we got the hand perfectly sitting on the surface. Now I could grab the elbow and the hand will stay there. So if the character's like standing up, his hand could be on a table, it just stays there. So that's all well and good. Now, until I would be making a really big fancy character, it's going to be hard to get so many tags that the priorities get out of order. So I'm going to have to intentionally break the priority here. So in order to intentionally break the priority, I'm going to grab this first tag. I'm going to say, actually calculate 1 later, okay? And the instant I told it to calculate 1 later, suddenly the hand isn't facing the correct direction. So what's happening now? What's happening is the wrist is saying, like, okay, I want you to follow the rotation of this hand. And this hand is like, okay, I want you to aim out that way. So that calculates first because we are in priority expression and then expression 0. After that comes 1. So this calculates after. So first this happened. So it said, okay, set the hand rotation. And then suddenly this elbow is like, okay, but set up the elbow rotation. And the tip here, this actual wrist, is by default always going to snap to the direction of the elbow. So it calculates later, which means it's now broken. This is the kind of thing when you're making a more advanced rig that you can get the priorities out of order, and this type of problem can happen. And then of course the fix is to make sure that they calculate in the order you want them to happen mechanically. So let's say that this one is stuck at expression 1. We'd be like, okay, well that should calculate first. Now I move up to the next tag, in this case, this one. I'm gonna say, that means you should calculate later. So I could say expression 1, and now it will go back to being correct because technically this one goes first, and then a child, and then the grandchild, they go in order. They also go in order from left to right. Depending on the situation, it could be even smarter to increase this by additional numbers, even just 1. Now, even if somehow this hierarchy got rearranged and this tag came before it, it would still say calculate after because it has to be an expression 1. So now its position in the hierarchy doesn't matter because 2 is always going to be bigger than 1. And then just to wrap up this bit of the conversation, when it comes to priority, like all of the initial calculate before any of the animation. All of the animation happened before any of the expression. And then, so on and so forth. And then when it comes to like initial animation, like this is when cinema calculates animation. So it's like the expressions happen after animation. So point here being, if I move this hand, that would be like animation. And then after the animations happen, then it says, okay, now that I know that the null is moving from here to here, snap the elbow to it. Now rotate the wrist to be there. So that's why that, expressions come after animation. And then dynamics happen. And then generators happen. So like the subdivision surface would happen kind of last. Yeah, so that's kind of some basic priority stuff. I know it's not like the craziest setup, but without having a, like without designing a rig that's like a 2-hour rig with like double jointed elbows, you don't really have to get into priority too much. But when a priority is messed up in a character, it can drive you nuts because you get that 1 frame of lag sometimes. Basic arm joint rig. Just in case anybody wanted to have a basic elbow. Anyway, we're a little over time, but I'm going to answer that final question about Slicer because I love Slicer. If anybody doesn't know, Slicer is another plugin from Rocket Lasso, and it chops up an object in the simplest form. So if I were to show you the most basic and kind of fun example that we can do super quickly, here's a landscape. Now I say I want a slicer, and I drop landscape in the slicer, and it's going to create a series of splines by slicing through it. There's a bunch of, just like Ricochet, we got a lot of controls in here. I'll say I want to auto scale this, so now it's perfectly matching the overall height. And I can increase the number of slices. Now we get a whole bunch of different slices. The specific question came in when it comes to colorizing it. And if we go under spline, I'm going to lock this because I have to deselect it because it's highlighted. If it's highlighted, we can't see it. So now we can go and say, right now the splines are closed and there's no segments. If we make this editable, it's one object. But I can say, actually explode into each layer. So every single layer is its own object. So if I make this editable, you'll see that we get a series of splines, each layer exploded. But then I could say, now that they're exploded, I can say I can colorize each one of them. So we've got the options we have are, we've got a bunch, but one of the main ones is going to be random. And then you see that we're going to get completely random colors of the rainbow. And then we can do grayscale, but it's going to be random grayscale colors. And then we can snap through here and you get a bunch of different random colors, but we don't have direct control over those. And then you do as input, which would take it, it would make it the color of the object. But this object is only one color, so it's probably just going to make them all white or this light gray. But the one that's going to give you the most control here is actually doing from matrix. Before we get to from matrix, though, let's go back into the main tab. And currently, it's based on the orientation of Z+, but let's turn on matrix mode. And if I click create matrix, it's actually, we do so much work on these plugins, it's ridiculous. So it doesn't look like anything changed, but we just took the current settings from the slicer, made a brand new matrix object, and then fed the matrix in properly with all the settings. So it didn't look any different, but what's happened now is, and let me pull this out of the hierarchy, you can see that there is a bunch of different matrix objects set up, and even inside the matrix, let me unlock. Inside the matrix, we set it to like the Rocket Lasso spline color, which is this teal. You can see that I've got a whole bunch of different matrix objects following through. So if I say, okay, matrix, I would like you to have a plane, actually, yeah, we'll just do a plane effector. I don't want to affect the position, but I do want to affect the color. So we should turn on color. Oh yeah, it's using the field color. So now I say I would like a step and turn on color in the step. Inside of step, go to color, set that to a gradient. And now I say I would like that to be, I don't know, let's even load one. Let's load preset. And we'll just grab the rainbow. So now you see we got a rainbow matrix. So now, because this slicer is based off these matrices, and just to show you, if I were to grab this matrix object and say move it up in the air, do you see how they're all moving with it? And if I put in a random effector, those will all move. And it's now you see that the slices all move to like match where those matrices got moved to. But here they are, and it's just using these colors. So if I go back into the slicer, under, let's lock again, deselect so we can see it. I'm going to say I want the colorize to not be random and not be grayscale, but I want it to be from matrix. So now it's taking the exact color of the matrix that made that cut and then applying it here, and now we get a perfect controllable rainbow matrix passing through. I mean, you could have also probably put it into a fracture object and then controlled it via a fracture, but this way you can do it directly from the matrix. Ooh, Slicer's really fun. Looks like that colored the question. Let's see. Gotta go. Yeah. Yep, we are a little bit over in time, so we should wrap this up. Okay, yeah, that should wrap this up. Thank you so much, everybody. It was a good episode. We got some good technical, questions. Keep in mind, next week is a special episode. First guest of the season, Rick Barrett, joining. And then the week after, I'll be in Vegas. So there will be a live stream, just not Rocket Lasso Live. It'll be from the Maxon booth. So that should cover all of that. We already put the link to everything. Slack, I guess I could repost it. I shouldn't have closed the window. So let me put that in the window and in the chat. Here is the link to the community page. So head on over there. And in addition to that, you could always go to... You can go and get access to all the scene files I just made and saved. And I guess I should probably save this one as well. I'll do that in a second. Yeah, and I post all these scene files on Patreon if you're supporting at the engineer level. So in any case, that should wrap this one up. Thank you so much for all the excellent questions and all the new exploration. It was fun tackling things that we had never done before. So that should do it for me. And oh good, the monitor just turned off, which has been a problem. And now I'm not going to be able to stop the stream. Let's see. I was kind of worried about this. Oh, it woke back up. Okay, I'm going to stop the stream before I lose control of the monitor. So turn on the audio and click on roll credits. Bye-bye.